and thank you for everyone for coming in such early time. I hope you all had your coffees. Thank you also to the organizers for bringing us together in such a special setting to discuss Greece and business extroversion. Over the many panels, we again hear about the story of Greece, and Greece's economic recovery has been remarkable. From the edge of the Eurozone to growing at roughly triple the growth rate of EU average. Sustaining this momentum is not guaranteed, and strong macro performance is not sufficient to ensure competitiveness. So the real question, and the question that we as a panel will try to discuss and explore, is how we can translate now this momentum to build a stronger, a bolder vision, a vision that will be regional, a vision that can be more global. So to explore that, we have designed a diverse group of a panel. And we have with us Stelios Fráγκος, the CEO of HIF, a key pillar of the Growth Fund, Andreas Athanasopoulos, CEO of Olympia Group, Mαρσέλ Κομπούς, Chair of the Executive Committee of Titan Group, and Anthony Παπαδημητρίου, President of Onassis Foundation. So let's start the discussion by addressing three topics. We'll start first with where Greece can win. Second, how Greek companies can compete. And third, how we can stay ahead of the current AI supercycle. So, Stelios, the first question to you. Where do you see Greece's genuine window today? And, having a lot of years outside Greece, we want a balanced view of in which sectors can we have a right to win? In which geographies can we be shapers and not just participants?
Yossi, thank you very much for the invite. It's a pleasure to be here. It's always a tough act to kick things off, both in a panel and in the agenda. I think people are trickling in, which is great. I think it was a big night last night. Let me start by saying the following. Up until recently, and I'll reframe this in a second, Greece was all about a risk story. It's no longer that, though, right? We've consistently outperformed the Eurozone. I think that investment grade, as we all know, has been restored, and the banking system has been transformed, and HFSF on the Growth Fund played a key role in that. So this is no longer a recovery. This is fundamentally a re-rating of the country, right? So in my mind, I think that the way we need to frame this is that our stability has become the key asset itself for Greece, and that's what we need to leverage. In terms of sectors, I would say that there's three main, there's more, but there's three main we should focus, and it's all about keeping it narrow and tight, because that's where we lose the window and the frame of opportunity. Let's start with energy, right? Energy's fundamental and everything, and underpins everything we do these days, right? And we've seen the narrative about independence, sovereignty, the ability to withstand conflict, crisis that comes from it, right? And let's take a stock where Greece is, right? 50+% of renewable energy, target to go up to 80% by 2030. And, taking a step back, Mazda's, entry point into Terna Energy, 3.2 billion, is the largest ever investment in Greece in itself, right? It tells you where capital is putting its money. It's very, very clear as a message and as a signal. If we take a step back and we look at energy in Greece, right, we sit as the southern anchor of the vertical corridor, right? So this is no longer something that was a convenience, because in 2022 that changed. It became a fundamental pillar of European energy security, right? De-risking and reducing dependence on Russian gas. One other point that we need to work further on, and there's a real opportunity there, is interconnectors, right? These convert our geography into true leverage. You look at Gregi, at GSI, and I think you're connecting north-south, east-west, right? And you're connecting North Africa into Europe, and you're bringing that across the Adriatic. However, this is not automatic, right? There's a real binding constraint here, and we heard a lot about it yesterday. It was on my panel. We heard it subsequently. There was PPC's announcements as well. I think I was seeing the grid, right, in terms of transmission, storage, and cross-border interconnectors, right? In order to actually leverage and create this competitive advantage, we really need to invest in our grid, and that's the key point. And by the way, that's the least glamorous, right? But it is the most decisive. It's not sexy, investing in your grid, but we have to do it, and we have to do it right and in a timely fashion. If we do want to become a southeastern hub of the European grid, or just a peripheral supplier. Switching gears and going back to something I think we're known across the board, I won't say shipping directly, I say logistics anchored by shipping, right? So where do we sit geographically, right? Suez Canal meets Europe. This is the trade routes from the GCC, Indian Ocean, and Asian supply chains. In a world where there's a fundamental shift to reshoring, we're looking at rerouting of supply chains. Greece has played its role both during the Houthi crisis, putting troops on the ground, and patriots. Contested sea lanes, and we're looking at the whole European infrastructure and economy depending on this. The real task at hand is for us to become a hub, not that transit point. That's where the value add comes in. So, wearing the group hat for a second, we've already done some development in Greece in terms of ports, but looking at the next generation, Volos, Alexandroupoli, Elefsina, I think that this can really help become the connective tissue, and these are not standalone assets. These are being pushed forward. This will add capacity, and it'll help in creating the hub. Lastly, but not least, Greek shipping, Greek-owned shipping, right? We're the tonnage providers. We do deliver on that. What we haven't done is we haven't created maritime clusters, right? And fundamentally, that's where we need to bring finance, we need to bring tech, insurance, crewing, sustainable maritime fuel is going to be the next step. We need it not just for cargo and for freight, but also on coastal shipping, right? It's fundamental to our needs. In order to become the Europeans' sound of gateway, right, we need to see where that east-west trade lane lands, and I think we do need to be the receiving point, process it, and move it up north. That's fundamentally what the role that we should be playing. Third, and I think it's extremely topical looking forward, is tech/talent. And why do I lump this together? Because, well, if we look at, for example, Cadent's recent acquisition of Beta, right, 1.24 billion, I think it really shows us that what they valued was the engineering depth that is real and investable, right? And we have close to a dozen unicorns. Endeavor, has played a key role in that ecosystem, and these unicorns have some sort of Greek roots, right? As part of the Greek diaspora, they've been built abroad. We need to find a way to bring them home, right? Not just talent. We need to bring the entrepreneurs, the operators, and the capital. And the fundamentals for Greece are there, right? You have both the cost structure, the time zone, engineering talent, and the quality of life. Let's be honest about it, right? Especially in that sector, that is key. So, again, another binding constraint, however, that we're kind of really struggling with, digital infrastructure. We really need, and that's the opportunity there, right? Fiber data centers, cloud connectivity. Those are the three fundamental things that underpin that next level to be able to have that hook. And if you take a step back, I think you'll see that energy and digital, those are the twin foundations. Without them, this is all a theoretical possibility. I think if we invest in them, then we really create that attraction, that game changer for Greece to become home for this and become a hub as well. I'm going to add a fourth one very quickly, just conscious of time, because I'm going a bit more. Blue economy, right? And it goes across the board. We have the biggest coastline in Europe. I think we need to take advantage of it. It can help on the desalination, for an example, solve some of our short-term issues on water. I think we can, there's biotech, marine biotech, there's coastal tourism. There's a lot of verticals in that subsectors in there that can really make a difference. I talked before about capital, sort of following the capital, right? We talked about Masdar. I think UniCredit's acquisition, entry point into Alpha was key. And Euronext, right, in Athens. It really shows you that there's a fundamental institutional confidence. And in education and healthcare, we've had 6 different PE groups investing in Greece in various points, right? Some of them are smaller, but I think it's a very clear sign of things to come. So going back to your point about being a shaper, where Greece can lead, let's play where, our right to play is in the Eastern Med, historically, culturally, and from a location perspective. The EU-MENA corridor as well is key because we're close. if we want to be honest, everywhere else, we should just be a participant, right? Trying to shape everywhere else as a small country is where, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to waste our window in terms of
Thank you. Thank you, Stelio. And I think we started with a very nice broader view of where Greece can win, and now maybe we can zoom and double down on the historic sector, shipping, that you elaborate a little bit with Anthony. Yes. So, Anthony, tell us, what do you think now is changing in shipping, and how we can move not only from a mindset of protecting what we have built until now, but also how we can advance the shipping sector?
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate being here. And also, I think the question is quite interesting, particularly for Greece. Shipping, we're talking here in the context of AI, technology, science, etc. And shipping appears to be a little bit on the backside of that, because shipping is transporting physical goods, physical materials, energy in physical form, grain, cargoes, commodities, containers, all the stuff that you can touch and use, actually eat or use. However, and I will come back to that. However, in shipping, there is a lot of technology. What I wanted to say, shipping is a whole ecosystem. It's not one thing. We're talking about shipping, we're talking about the ownership of ships, management, growing finance, which includes banking, equity, public markets. Very important, the tax system and the regulatory system, which is very important because we have all these regulations that impose significant burdens on shipping. Shipping is considered, small parenthesis, shipping is producing only 3% of the CO2 in the world. However, it is the cheapest way to transport commodities in bulk, both in terms of dollars as well as in terms of CO2 emissions. So by ton transported, the quantity of CO2 emitted by shipping is really minimal. However, it has taken a very large proportion of the bad publicity, which is interesting as a fact. Then we have, of course, insurance, we have class societies. A very important fact, shipbuilding. Where are the ships being built? Again, coming back to that if we have the time. Cargoes, chartering, where do we get the cargoes? So it's a whole thing here. And for us, Greece, I'm talking to Stelios here, touched upon that before. What is the Greek part of that? What does Greek shipping mean? Where is Greek quality in shipping? So here we have, we used to have Greek flag ships, Greek people, crewed by Greek people, and administered, managed by Greek people here in Greece. But they were always backed and financed internationally, and the cargoes were always internationally. We did try at a point in time to build ships in Greece. We had actually a comparative advantage and a time advantage, because in Greece we had the largest graving dock in the world, 500,000 tons in Skaramangas, built by Mr. Niarchos. And then we had Elefsina, we have Syros, and we had Greek owners, but very few ships actually were built. So in 1960, Mr. Niarchos started Skaramangas. In 1960, Korea was building 0 ships. Today, we are building 0 ships, almost 0. I'm talking about the big ships now. But Korea is building 30% of the total world ships. Although there are Korean ship owners, they're not as big as the Greek ship owners. So that's, again, a question here, what happened there? What remains is that in Greece now, today, in Paris, we have a cluster. We do have a cluster which supports shipping. We have a very good tax environment. Greece is part of the European Union, so we can influence the European regulations as far as shipping is concerned. The Greek shipowners, some of them no longer speak Greek. The ships don't have too many Greek crew. The cargoes are definitely not Greek. But still, there is a Greek shipping. It's important. And it's important to keep that. And in my opinion, we don't need the state. The state is, the Greek state supports Greek shipping, and we are thankful for that, particularly by providing a good environment where we can have our home, we don't pay taxes, or we pay minimal taxes. It's fine, everything is all right, but we don't need interference by the Greek state. It's not conducive to good business.
Excellent. Thank you, Anthony, and thank you both for opening and answering the question on where can Greece win. And I heard a lot of messages about, playing a lot the ecosystem and the full value chain rather than trying to focus on specific pockets of these sectors. Now, let's go to the second topic, and Andrea, I'm turning to you to speak about the second half of the equation on how companies can compete. And we are seeing many different models. In Greece, historically, we were more using for extroversion the export-led model. But can you elaborate a little bit on the different models of business extroversion, and maybe give us your point of view on which models you think are becoming more relevant in this multipolar world and in the current dynamics?
Thank you. Good morning to everybody, and thank you for being here today. My 5 minutes of wisdom is going to be about the word of extroversion. Greece has been a country whereby extroversion has been more or less tantamount to exports. But if we think about it, there are 3 distinct pillars of extroversion. One is exports, and of course, it's very good. It's very good to have it. The second is you go beyond exports and you build outside your territory of operation commercial activities, service activities, some kind of representation. So far, it's quite simple. Capital light, not a lot of risks. But there's a third one, which is the most challenging for Greece and Greek enterprises, which has to do with on-site presence outside your territory, and especially at a global scale. So in other words, to commit investment, capital, to build factories, to have R&D, to have the full stack outside your own territory. Just for reference purposes, in the US, we have not found more than 5 companies, Greek companies, that they have such operation today. One is next to me, Titan, Sunlight, 3 factories in the US. We have the Hellenic Cables, Fage, and this is as far as it goes. So what I'm trying to say is, this is a very big challenge. Why is it a challenge? You would say, produce where you are and try and sell. First of all, there are some physical challenges. If you produce in Greece and you try and sell and transport in the US, the costs are going to be quite significant. Clients cannot wait. But beyond that, the global changes that have happened with what is called now friend-shoring. You see, every time we have a crisis, we come up with new acronyms, whereby you have to be in the US, because if you are not in the US, you don't have an IRA, you have only tariffs. And IRA funding compensates for tariffs. And therefore, this equation has changed dramatically. The supply chain disruptions also have played a role. So therefore, if you are a Greek-based company and you want to compete and you produce manufacturing goods, and especially industrial manufacturing goods, you have to examine very carefully your presence outside your own territory. Now, we are quite lucky and happy to have Sunlight in our portfolio. We own 100% of Sunlight. And Sunlight has presence in more than 15 countries with production, some in Europe, but some also in the US. In North Carolina, we have 2 mega factories. We have committed $100 million over the last 5 years in making these factories. So for us, the recent geopolitical events became, from one day to another, an existential risk to a blessing. I'm a bit ashamed to admit that for us, it's much more economic to produce in the US and export in Europe, as we speak, than the other way around. And we do it. It's as simple as that. And we will do it as much as we can. Now, it's a different conversation, the policy rules and what Europe does to complement that and address that, but the hard reality is what I just referenced to. Now, if we look at some, let's say, success factors on this difficult discipline, is something we don't talk too much. Nobody talks about Titan having production in the US. Nobody cares about Sunlight having production in the US, but we do care, because this is part of our survival. So if you want to play that game, you have to make very disciplined capital allocation. We are not subsidized by the Chinese government, as our Chinese competitors are subsidized to make investments all around the world. So therefore, the capital we commit in these foreign activities is capital we generate, either from our own profit or from our own credit lines we get from Greece, because in the US, we are Mr. Unknown. And the US banks wouldn't offer us the terms we can get here from the commercial banks in Greece, for instance. And we are very appreciative for that. The second is, you cannot run North Carolina from Athens. We have made all these kind of mistakes. You have to have very strong local leadership. But the local leadership is not a franchise operation. So therefore, you have to have people on airplanes in and out all the time that they don't have a country. So immediately you start having all the problems of multinationals, that we are envying them, but when you are challenged to do it yourself, you contemplate a lot of practical and real issues. You have to make acquisitions in order to accelerate. And above all, global expansion creates a lot of costs. And you must never forget the cost leadership. If you want to survive at this global environment, you have to be ruthless with your costs. So you commit capital outside, you have to have local leadership, and then you have to be prepared, the local colleagues that create all the value, to see the salaries of the US colleagues and not faint. And live with that. So this is a topic that we don't talk too much, and I'm very helpful. It's very helpful that BCG brought that up. We tend to support Greek enterprises to make investments in Greece. We give a lot of subsidies. We do, which is the right thing to do. But if you want to be global from a very small country of that kind, which is a defensive action. Listen, some people think that these things happen in order to make yourself bigger. No, it's a defense line. If you don't do it, you will not exist. So therefore, globalization for us is an act of positioning outside your own territory. And by the way, not in weaker economies. The old norm of going from advanced economies to less advanced economies to show how doesn't work. You have to be able to commit investments in advanced economies where competition has a different meaning. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea, and I think that's a perfect segue. You know, when you speak about Titan, and Marcel, I'm addressing you, this is something that you have been doing for many years, not to say decades. And I think what is really interesting is to understand what are the learnings from your side, because you are, as Andrea said, in some very competitive markets, some advanced markets. So what Now, thinking a little bit forward, what are the things that could make you locally relevant and competitive as Titan?
Thank you, Yossi. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Andreas, for this nice introduction. I will build on most of the points of Andreas. Titan is 124 years old, and the past 30 years has internationalized a lot. Currently, we have a presence in 25 countries, with 15 countries with manufacturing, and 60% of the business comes from United States. Now, I agree that the export-led or product export-led growth is behind us. However, I would argue that there is a model of Greek excellence which can still be exported. And maybe in a few minutes, I'll try to explain how Titan is gaining traction on this. Titan is not anymore about a cement story. It's more about advanced materials. It's about advanced technologies and exporting leadership model. And there are probably 3-4 fundamentals which are important in this global expansion. And you know, over the past 3 years, we made more than 15 bolt-ons. These are acquisitions. You normally just connect the wires and keep growing, or partnerships. And over the 6 months, the past 6 months, we made a large acquisition in Pennsylvania, another one in northwestern France, and the last one in Greater Istanbul market. So there is a machine of acquiring and integrating business. So what's the model which allows you to manage the current business and current portfolio without becoming overly bureaucratic and bringing much complexity, and at the same time integrating businesses in order to get to the next phase? First is to consider a local business, localizing the management, having local assets, local customer relationships are key. That level of empowerment, but also the level of accountability, is not giving autonomy for the sake of autonomy. It has to be underpinned by a very strong discipline when it comes to capital allocation, when it comes to global standards. You know, the same way we supply our customers here in Ellinikon in very complex projects, the same way we should be able to supply in Space Coast in Florida, where there are 200 launches every year, and at every launch you have to build another platform of concrete. So how do you make sure that that stands? It's by ensuring the standards are very clear. Second, you build leading positions everywhere you operate, and that means vertical integration, you know, upstream, downstream, and relationship to the end users. But these are strongly backed by brands. For instance, in Titan, we have the same brands globally, although they are managed locally. The Titan Prime and the Titan Edge or the Triforce, you see them everywhere, with very little synergies between markets, but obviously with the same commitment to the customer when it comes to quality, reliability, and execution. The third element is about exporting technology. And here, one should be smart enough, and Andreas mentioned the friendshoring. Look, we have a project in US, in West Virginia, where, by the way, we deliver 40% of the data centers. There is a data valley in that area on calcined clay. That's a material which has a substitute, much lower carbon than the normal materials we produce. That's a technology that we will pioneer in US and export it back to Europe, where it's known much less. And similarly, Brussels Horizon Fund is financing the largest carbon capture project in Europe, which is in Athens here, is in Kamari plant. It's allowing the carbon capture of close to 2 million tons. That's a technology which is with a high level of realization level and would be exportable elsewhere. So you need to have in the multinationals that we are building, including the Greek ones expanding internationally, that center of technology which allows you to transfer technologies on both sides of the Atlantic, just for the sake. The third, and probably the most important glue, is the culture. In such a portfolio of local businesses is the culture which is the federating element. In Titan, we have renewed and refreshed our 120 years old founders and ancestors cultural elements like values and purpose. And I can tell you that there is no bigger pride than to see at the same time in a quarry in Egypt and a plant in US or a ready-mix plant here in Greece, all the people celebrating the same values of caring, daring, walking the talk, and building to last. So these are a bit the fundamentals in order to be local, highly competitive, but also acting with a global mindset and pushing for returns.
Thank you, Marcel and Andrea. And cognizant of time now, the next questions I would like to ask, if possible, to keep it less than 1 minute. The responses of Stelio, closely linked to how companies compete, is also how companies, especially Greek companies, can be competitive in attracting international funds and investments. So would you like to share your learnings on that?
Sure, and I'll give you the lens of a reformed investment banker, turnaround specialist, and an investor in Greece in particular. So I think we all agree the fundamentals are completely different than a decade ago, right? We have the prerequisite for investments, and we're seeing that the timing is right. However, your strengths don't really matter, right? It's what you do with them that really does. Very, very quickly, and I think especially our two operators here did go through it. First of all, it's our operational resilience, right? A decade of a crisis, I think it's a clear, distinct competitive advantage what our management teams have gone through and have come on the other side of it that is really can set apart. Global from day one, not just export, but also picking the right geographies to be able to go out there. Human capital that we mentioned. And I want to leave another one, right? The Greek diaspora can be a network that very other small countries would pay dear money for that we need to leverage. We have Greeks in every financial center. We should be leveraging that differently. Now, the hard part comes with what do you do with it? We need to scale up more. Consolidation, right? Our sectors, especially in Greece, are highly fragmented. Consolidation should not be a threat. It should be something that people need to focus on as a starting point. Governance. Capital does price a premium to the right governance. Digital and AI, we lag behind Europe on it. We have skilled labor, and we're underutilizing it. And the last bit is the storytelling, right? Let's stop talking about being a leader in Greece, right? Let's pick the geography, let's pick the messaging, and tell people something different. What we're seeing so far is that it's all about platform bets. No longer it's about single trades. I think both gentlemen to my right here talked about those, and I think fundamentally it comes down to it. So the question will stop being if we do these things, whether international capital comes in, but fundamentally in which countries it will actually invest in.
Thank you, Stelio. And with that, we go to our closing topic of the agenda today, which is, okay, how can we do all these learnings that Andreas and Marcel said on the competitiveness while we are in the AI super cycle that is moving super fast? And then maybe, Andrea, starting with you, again, 1-2 minutes of wisdom in terms of what do you think Greek companies need to do in order to extract value from that super cycle, but at the same time avoid obsolescence?
Yes, I think you cannot escape a conference without being asked about AI. AI for everything. In the industrial sector, because we have many other companies, and I don't want to touch upon our other companies, let's focus on Sunlight. There are two things we have to consider. One is data. AI without data is just forget it. So industrial companies, especially companies that they make acquisitions and they grow with acquisitions, suffer a lot and they need to invest a lot. And this is the hidden cost of AI, to be able to have common platforms of data in order to work and extract value from AI. This is one. The second is we work enormously hard to embed AI into the product. A lithium cell is a living organism and produces data across thousands of forklifts that's embedded. Therefore, you have to move into very advanced agentic, edge AI platforms, whereby you work on the costs. It has enormous R&D embedded, but if you do it right, you can extract a lot of value. So what we do at Sunlight, we work with lots of Greek research institutions in order to build these prototype algorithms to embed AI within the products. Unfortunately, we talk a lot about AI in terms of reducing contact centers, making the accounting function better, producing PowerPoints better. That's fine, it's useful. But in an industrial setting, I'm afraid the equation and the challenge is fundamentally different, much more embedded, and if you don't do it, there are the Chinese in the corner waiting, and they're going to do it better than you, I guarantee. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. And Marcel, I think also you as an industrial player, very striking how you are playing both as a user from the early days with many use cases along your value chain, also as a builder, because you have some AI and actually you are commercializing some of these use cases, and then even as an AI investor. So tell us how you use all these things in order to be more competitive in the future. Again, apologies, a short point so we can close the panel with Anthony.
Yeah, maybe two aspects to this topic. One is I'm trying to make myself as much as possible uncomfortable with this AI trend and my executive team in order to learn much faster. And that means, spending time, getting exposed, then piloting, but not getting stuck on piloting and scaling up and very, very fast. 1 month ago, I was in Silicon Valley, and 2 weeks ago, I was in China. Just to bring back what it means for industrial manufacturing. Last year, this time, in Silicon Valley, everything was about generative AI. This year, it's only about agentic AI. So the valley is coming after the workflows. Then you go to China, and everything is about the physical AI. That means robots in warehousing, robots in industrial manufacturing. I have seen plants in darkness, meaning that they don't need to have the lights on, simply because everywhere there are robots. So US is coming after your workflows and customer workflows, and China is coming after your plant floor. How do you survive? You have to iterate and do much more in terms of pilots and scaling up. And I think here, Titan, we started with real problems, energy consumption, and you start solving a real problem by having real-time optimizers, sensorizing. We have 30,000 sensors in our plants. 80% of the assets are already digitally twinned, and we are reducing downtime. Second, you have to build. As soon as this is replicable, and you do it across your assets, you are developing internal capabilities, which you then offer it to the industry. We are already productizing that AI, and we are offering even to our competitors through SemAI or others. And we invest through a venture capital fund, the Titan Ventures. We invest continuously in adjacencies on this. I think that's a model that each of us can do. So instead of I would say complaining about the overregulation of EU on AI, let's start doing things, deploy them fast, and sell it to the industries we belong.
Thank you, Marcel. And apologies, we'll use extra 1 minute. So Anthony, if you can please share with us, because it's important to put AI to work in the industry, but also in some more foundational parts of our society, education, healthcare, culture. Can you give us at least one example, given we are out of time, of how you are putting AI to work?
Well, we are very shortly. First of all, in shipping, we are actually using AI, and we have developed internally, in-house, a monitoring system for fuel consumption, and which we did ourselves. We spent $250,000, and we saved about $15 to $17 million a year. But on the public benefit side, we have used, with the help of VCG, and thank you very much for that, we have used all the high technology in the hospital, in the ONES hospital, which has an extremely developed system. It's the first hospital in Greece, which is fully digitized. And we are also now giving for free to, this is an initiative of the Prime Minister, ChatGPT for free to the students of the 20 honest schools.
Excellent. So thank you, dear panelists. Thank you all for your attention, and hope you enjoy the learnings.
Thank you very much.